The day I signed those papers, I thought I was securing my family's future. I didn't know I was handing my life's work to someone who would destroy it. That memory still sits in my chest like a stone. The smell of ink, the click of the pen, my brother's smile, everything felt so normal, so trusting. I remember the way his wife, Lila, leaned over my shoulder, pretending to read the fine print with me. She smelled faintly of citrus and perfume. Her nails were polished a deep, confident red. That should have been my first clue. Lila always dressed like she knew something I didn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, life still made sense. Our family business wasn't big, but it was ours. My father started it 30 years ago, a small printing shop at the corner of Maple and Fifth. We printed flyers, invitations, menus for local restaurants. The air always smelled like paper dust and fresh ink, and there was this steady hum from the old machines that never stopped. My brother Daniel and I grew up among those machines. He used to joke that the shop raised us more than our parents did. When Dad passed away, the business came to us, equally. 50-50. I handled the clients, the finances, the late-night orders. Daniel was better with the machines and the design work. We were a good team, at least, for a while. Then Lila came into the picture. She was smart, ambitious, and beautiful, the kind of woman who could light up a room without even trying. I liked her, at first. She brought Daniel lunches, stayed late to help us clean, talked about modernizing the brand. I thought she cared about us, about what our family had built. But slowly, she started inserting herself into decisions that weren't hers to make. I just think we could rebrand the logo, she'd say, her voice sugar-sweet. Or, maybe we should open a second branch. Daniel and I could handle the business side while you focus on clients. It sounded innocent enough. And because I trusted my brother, I went along with most of it. Before long, things began to change. The sign outside that once read, Harris Printing, family owned since 1993, became just, Harris Company. She said it looked more modern. The stationery we used stopped carrying Dad's old logo, the one with the two hands shaking. At first, I laughed it off. It's just branding, Daniel told me. We're still the same business. But it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. I remember one evening in particular. It was late, maybe past 10 p.m. The shop lights were dim, and I was finishing up invoices at the counter. Lila walked in, dressed in a blazer, holding a thick folder. Just paperwork, she said when I asked what it was. Something the accountant needs. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't ask again. I should have. The next day, Daniel mentioned wanting to streamline ownership so the bank could approve a loan for new equipment. It's just temporary, he said. We'll put the business under one name for now. It'll make the process smoother. I remember laughing nervously. Under whose name? He looked at me, then glanced at Lila. Lila's, he said. She has the best credit score. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no, but my love for my brother was louder. I signed those papers without a second thought. That was the day I unknowingly gave everything away. For a while, nothing seemed wrong. In fact, business improved. Lila handled marketing, Daniel upgraded the machines, and I focused on clients. We even got featured in the local paper as a rising small business. Lila framed the article and hung it near the front door. But cracks began to show, quiet at first. Invoices went missing. Clients started calling me, confused about new pricing. Lila insisted on handling payments herself. Daniel, usually the peacekeeper, avoided every conflict by saying, just trust her, she knows what she's doing. I started noticing little shifts. My name disappeared from our websites. About Us section. Emails from major clients went directly to Lila. And when I called the accountant, he said, you'll have to talk to Mrs. Harris about that. Mrs. Harris. Not me, her. I tried not to overthink it. I convinced myself that maybe this was just what growth looked like, uncomfortable but necessary. Still, there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. I began keeping my own records. Quietly. Every invoice, every client order, every payment I received, I made copies, stored them in a red folder under my desk. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew I needed proof. Then came the night everything began to unravel. We'd been invited to a local business gala, one of those events where everyone wears too much perfume and pretends to be successful. Lila wore a gold dress that shimmered under the lights, Daniel in his crisp black suit. I wore the same navy gown I'd worn at Dad's retirement dinner. When they announced the Business of the Year award, I nearly cried hearing our name. But as they called Lila Harris, owner of Harris Company, to the stage, my hands froze mid-applause. Owner. Not co-owner. Not partner. Owner. The applause echoed around me while I stood there, heart pounding. Lila accepted the plaque, smiling wide. Daniel stood beside her, proud, oblivious. When she spoke into the microphone, her words cut deeper than any betrayal could. This business wouldn't exist without my vision, my leadership, and the unwavering support of my husband. Not a single mention of me. Not one. That night, on the drive home, I stared out the window in silence while they laughed in the front seat. I could see their reflections in the glass, the perfect couple. And behind them, I sat invisible, clutching my small purse like a lifeline. Something inside me broke quietly that night. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. The morning after the gala, the plaque with Lila's name was already hanging in the shop. She'd placed it right above the front counter, the first thing customers saw when they walked in. I stood there staring at it, trying to swallow the knot in my throat. Daniel came up behind me, smiling. Looks good, huh? Yeah, I said, forcing a small smile. Except my name's missing. He chuckled, brushing it off. You're overthinking it. You know she handles the paperwork. It's all of ours, really. But it didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like mine had quietly been taken away. That day, I decided to dig deeper. It started small, late nights at the office after everyone left. I'd go through the filing cabinet, pretending to organize invoices, but really, I was looking for anything that had my name on it. What I found instead was silence. Contracts were now in her name. Supplier accounts had her email. The business bank account statements, which used to be addressed to Harris Printing Company, now read Lila Harris Enterprises, LLC. I froze. My name wasn't anywhere. I remember sitting there in the flickering fluorescent light, the smell of toner in the air, papers scattered around me like snow. The hum of the old printer sounded almost mocking now. I took pictures of everything on my phone. Every page, every signature. I still hoped it was some sort of administrative mix-up, maybe a legal technicality. I told myself, Daniel would never let this happen intentionally. But deep down, I knew Lila was too deliberate for accidents. The next morning, I confronted Daniel in the back office. He was fixing one of the machines, sweat glistening on his forehead. Danny, I need to ask you something, I said. He looked up, smiling. You sound serious. Do you know the business isn't registered under my name anymore? His expression faltered for a second, just a flicker, before he forced a laugh. What are you talking about? Of course it is. Then why do all the documents say Lila Harris Enterprises? He dropped the wrench. It clanged against the floor, echoing in the silence. Look, he said finally, rubbing his temples. Lila talked to a lawyer. It was just easier to consolidate everything under one name for tax purposes. It doesn't change anything. Doesn't change anything? I said, my voice trembling. It changes everything. My name's gone, Daniel. I'm not even a partner on paper anymore. He sighed. You're making this bigger than it is. That sentence, that tone, shattered something between us. I walked out without another word. The following weeks were a blur of quiet hostility. Lila acted as though nothing had happened, offering me coffee in the mornings, commenting on how tired I looked. She even started calling me sis again. That word, from her mouth, felt poisonous. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, the office walls were thin. Her voice was low but sharp. "Yes, transfer everything to the new account," she said. "No, he doesn't need to know. It's handled." When I stepped into the room, she smiled. "Oh hey. Just sorting out some supplier issues." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but something in me had gone cold. That night, I drove home and sat in my car for a long time before going inside. My apartment was quiet, too quiet. I used to love the sound of the city outside my window, but lately it felt lonely. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and spread out the copies of all those documents I'd taken. I read every line. Every clause. Every tiny footnote in the fine print I'd once ignored. That's when I saw it. A small section buried at the bottom of one document. In the event of ownership transfer, all debts, obligations, and pending liabilities shall remain under the prior co-owner of record. My name. Right there, tied to every debt, every unpaid bill. They hadn't just erased me from ownership. They'd left me holding the entire financial burden. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My hands shook as I looked over bank statements, invoices, payment receipts. It was all there, months of quietly shifting responsibility onto me. Lila had used my loyalty, my trust, my name, as a shield. I called the accountant the next morning, voice trembling. "Mr. Collins, I need you to explain something to me. Why am I still listed as liable for all debts, if I'm no longer an owner?" There was a long pause. He cleared his throat. "Miss Harris, that was the arrangement your brother and his wife requested. I assumed you were aware." I gripped the phone tighter. I wasn't. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "It's quite common in small business transitions. One party keeps assets, the other retains obligations. You signed the consent forms." The world blurred. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall. For the first time in my life, I understood what betrayal really felt like, not the loud, dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks in disguised as trust. Over the next few weeks, I kept working. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me hoped Daniel would realize what he'd done. Maybe I wasn't ready to face the truth yet, that my own brother had allowed this. But every day, I saw it clearer. Lila had replaced me, in business, in decisions, in my brother's loyalty. One morning, I came in early and caught her giving instructions to one of the employees. "From now on, all invoices go through me," she said. "And make sure to remove her name from the letterhead." Her name. That's what I'd become, an inconvenience to be erased. When she saw me standing there, she smiled sweetly. "Oh, you're early," she said. I forced a nod. "Just wanted to get ahead on client calls." She tilted her head. "You really should take some time off, you know. You've been under so much pressure lately." There was something in her tone, almost pity, but not quite. Like she already knew how this would end. That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't fighting for a business anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. That night, I started planning. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do, but I knew this. I wasn't going to let them quietly destroy me. The next few days, I stopped pretending. No more forced smiles. No more small talk with Lila. No more asking Daniel for explanations he'd never give. I started documenting everything, every email, every message, every transaction. If they wanted to make me disappear quietly, I'd make sure the world heard the noise when I was gone. One evening, I came back to the shop after hours. The street was quiet, only the hum of distant traffic and the soft buzz of the neon sign outside, Harris Printing Company. It still had our last name, but it didn't belong to me anymore. Inside, the air smelled like ink and paper, familiar, comforting, almost cruel. I walked to the back office and sat in the chair I'd used for years. My chair. Then I opened the drawer, and that's when I saw it. A folder. Unlabeled. Out of place. I pulled it out, expecting invoices. But instead, copies of new contracts. Ones I'd never seen before. The first page hit me like a punch. Transfer of business ownership and property rights, effective immediately. It was signed by Daniel Harris and Lila Harris. My name was nowhere. I flipped through more papers, and then I saw the final page. It wasn't just the business. They were selling the building. The same building that used to be our childhood home before Dad turned it into the shop. That was my last piece of him, of us. And they were selling it behind my back. I drove straight to Daniel's house. He opened the door, surprised to see me. Lila was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely calm. "What's going on?" he asked. I threw the folder on the table. "You tell me." He looked through it quickly, then exhaled. "You weren't supposed to see this yet." "Yet? You were going to sell our family home without even telling me?" Lila spoke up, her tone syrupy smooth. "Technically, it's not yours anymore." I turned to her, my blood boiling. "You think you can just erase me from everything we built?" She shrugged. "Business is business." I laughed, bitterly, painfully. "You mean betrayal is betrayal?" Daniel stood up. "Stop. You're making a scene." "A scene?" I shouted. "I've lost everything, my business, my name, my family, and you think I care about making a scene?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. That silence, it said everything. I walked out before the tears could fall. That night, I went back to the shop one last time. The place felt different, empty, colder somehow. I ran my hand across the counter, the same one Mom used to lean on while watching us play in the shop's front window. I remembered her voice. "Family is the only thing that matters, honey. Everything else can be rebuilt." But she was wrong. Family can break you in ways strangers never could. For weeks, I stayed quiet. Everyone in town knew something was off, but I didn't say a word. Let them think I walked away. Until one morning, I got a letter. It was from the bank. Final notice, outstanding loan payment due, $48,200. The debt was still under my name. That's when everything inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them walk away smiling. I went back to the shop, not to fight, but to finish it. Lila was at the counter, laughing with a customer. Daniel was in the back, pretending to be busy. When the customer left, I walked up and handed her an envelope. She looked at it curiously. "What's this?" "Proof," I said quietly. Inside were copies of every falsified document, every email, every transfer. All with timestamps. All with their signatures. Her smile faltered. "Where did you get these?" "From the office. You thought I didn't know how to check." Daniel came out when he heard our voices. "What's going on?" "She knows," Lila said, her voice low. I turned to him. "You signed everything she wanted. You let her ruin me. For what? For a few extra dollars?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I stepped closer. "You didn't just sell a building, Daniel. You sold me. The sister who built this with you." For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then I smiled, not out of kindness, but relief. "Don't worry," I said softly. "You'll both get what you deserve." And I walked out. That afternoon, I went straight to a lawyer, not the small-town kind, but one who understood damage control. Within days, the truth started spreading. The paper trail was undeniable. Fraud. Forgery. financial manipulation. And when the investigation began, it wasn't my name they called into question. It was theirs. Weeks later, I drove by the shop again. The sign had been taken down. The windows were boarded up. The once busy place where I'd spent half my life now stood silent, like a ghost of everything we'd lost. I parked across the street and just stared at it. There was no satisfaction. No victory. Just peace. For the first time, I didn't feel like the victim anymore. I was free. I whispered quietly to myself. Mom was wrong about one thing: family isn't always forever. But self-respect, that's something you never let them take. And then I drove away. For the first time in months, I started sleeping through the night. The storm had passed, at least on the outside. The investigation into the fraudulent transfers moved faster than I expected. Turns out, Lila had been quietly moving assets for months, not just from the printing business, but from smaller accounts linked to my late father's estate. It wasn't just greed. It was control. She wanted everything that connected me to my family name gone, so that when people mentioned the Harris business, they'd think of her. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on. Dad had taught me to keep paper copies of every major transaction, neatly stacked in boxes, labeled by year. He used to say, computers crash. Paper doesn't. When Lila shifted the digital records, she forgot about the old ones. The originals. Signed by both of us. And those papers were what saved me. My lawyer, a woman named Clara, tough, calm, and razor-sharp, told me. They overplayed their hand. You don't just get to take something and hide it with signatures. I remember nodding, though I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or just empty. Because even if justice was on my side now, my brother wasn't. He hadn't called. Not once. About a month later, I finally saw him again. It was outside the courthouse, after a preliminary hearing. He looked older, like all the energy had drained out of him. "Hey," he said quietly. I didn't respond. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. I thought she knew what she was doing. I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean you didn't want to know?" He looked down at his shoes. "I messed up." "Yeah," I said. "You did." I could have yelled. I could have reminded him of every night I stayed late, every time I covered his mistakes, every bill I paid while he was on vacation with her. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at him. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked finally. "Not the money. Not losing the shop. It's knowing that I was fighting for something that you'd already given away." He opened his mouth, but there was nothing left to say. I walked away. Weeks turned into months. The court ordered the assets to be frozen until the investigation was done. Lila tried to spin the story online, called me vindictive, claimed I was trying to ruin her marriage. But truth has a way of crawling back to the surface, no matter how deep you bury it. Eventually, she stopped posting altogether. And Daniel. I think he finally saw her for who she was. I rented a small space in the next town over, just a corner shop with one old printer and a single desk. No sign, no big dreams. Just me. I called it Second Press. Because that's what life felt like, a second print, imperfect, but still beautiful. At first, I barely got any customers. But then, a few of our old clients started showing up. One after another. Quietly. I heard what happened, they'd say softly. "We trust you." Not them. That's how I rebuilt, slowly, with honesty. Each order I took felt like a piece of myself coming back. Each print, a small reminder that I didn't need a last name or inheritance to prove my worth. I had my integrity, and that was more valuable than anything they took. A year later, I was closing up one evening when someone knocked on the glass door. It was Daniel. He looked thinner, tired, but not the same man I'd last seen. I hesitated before unlocking the door. He stepped inside and said, I came to say sorry. I crossed my arms. You already said that. I know, he nodded. But this time, I mean it. Lila's gone. She left a few months ago. Took the money she had left and moved back to her parents. I didn't say anything. She ruined me, he said, almost whispering. And you were right, I let her. I didn't see what she was doing until it was too late. I could see the guilt in his eyes, deep, raw, heavy. I've been trying to get clean, he continued. Trying to fix things. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. For a moment, I wanted to scream at him. To ask him why he didn't fight for me when I was drowning under the debts he left behind. But something inside me had changed. I looked at him and saw not my enemy, but a broken man who'd lost his way. So I just said, I hope you find peace, Daniel. I really do. And that was it. He nodded, wiped his eyes, and left. Later that night, I sat at my desk and looked around the shop, my shop, filled with the hum of old printers and the faint smell of ink. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the empire we dreamed of. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt light, like I could finally breathe again. Sometimes, I thought about Lila. I wondered if she ever felt regret or shame. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But that didn't matter anymore. Because this peace, this freedom, was the revenge she could never take away. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, word by word, truth by truth. And I did it without her. Without them. Word spreads faster in small towns than ink through paper. Within months, everyone knew what had happened, how Lila had shifted the assets, how the court found her guilty of fraudulent transfer, how she quietly disappeared after the judgment. I didn't celebrate when I heard the verdict. There were no fireworks, no champagne. Just a quiet sigh, like a weight had been lifted that I'd carried for far too long. Justice doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes, it just arrives, soft and steady, like morning light through blinds. A local journalist called one afternoon. She'd heard whispers about a family business betrayal that ended with one woman starting over from scratch. She asked if she could tell my story. At first, I said no. I didn't want to reopen wounds that had barely healed. But then I thought about all the people like me, the ones who stayed silent, who kept working, who trusted family too much. So I said yes. When the article came out, the woman who lost her family business, but found herself, it spread faster than I imagined. People started visiting my shop just to shake my hand. Some cried while telling me their own stories. One woman whispered, I thought I was the only one. And in that moment, I realized something. My pain had a purpose. It could help others feel less alone. A few months later, I got a letter. Handwritten, with no return address. It was from Lila. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Her handwriting was neat, careful, just like always. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote. I've lost more than I ever thought I could. Daniel left. My family won't speak to me. I thought I was saving our legacy, but I was really just saving my pride. You didn't deserve what I did. I'm sorry. I read that letter 3 times. Not because I needed her apology, but because, for once, it sounded real. Not manipulative, not polished. Just, human. I put the letter in my desk drawer. Not to hold on to it, but to remind myself. Even the people who break you are still capable of remorse. That doesn't erase what they did, but it gives you a choice. To hate forever. Or to heal. Spring came again, and with it, a sense of calm. The air smelled of fresh ink and lilacs. My shop had grown. I'd hired a young girl from the local college to help me with orders. She reminded me of myself once, hopeful, trusting, ready to take on the world. One afternoon, she asked me, Miss Harris, do you ever regret starting over? I smiled. Every day, I said. But I also thank God for it. Because if everything hadn't fallen apart, I would have stayed in that old business, blind, dependent, small. I never would have learned what I was capable of alone. I never would have found my strength. Then, one evening, as I was closing shop, I saw something on the bulletin board near the cafe. A flyer. Community Business Award, recognizing local resilience. And there it was, second press, nominated. I laughed out loud, standing there in the cool spring air, feeling tears sting my eyes. I didn't care about awards, but something about it felt poetic. The business they stole from me had been my father's legacy. The one I built after they left, that was mine. And maybe that was the real inheritance all along. Not money. Not property. But grit. Faith. And the ability to stand tall again when life knocks you down. Months later, Daniel came by once more. This time, he didn't look broken, just older, quieter. He said he was moving to another city to start fresh. I just wanted to say goodbye, he told me. And, thank you. For not destroying me when you could have. I smiled softly. That's not who I am. He nodded, eyes glistening. I know. That's why you're still standing. As he left, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't need revenge anymore. Justice had come. Peace had followed. And forgiveness, well, forgiveness was just the last piece I had to give myself. Now, whenever I walk into my shop in the mornings, I still think of Dad, his rough hands guiding paper through the press, his calm voice saying, ink and truth, both stain deep. He was right. But he also forgot to mention, they can also mark your rebirth. I'm not angry anymore. Not at Lila. Not even at Daniel. Because without their betrayal, I would never have learned how to rebuild something stronger, not just a business, but a sense of self. Life doesn't always give you fairness. But sometimes, it gives you a second press. A second chance to print your own story, in your own ink. And that's what I did. When I look back now, I don't see loss anymore. I see a lesson. Losing the business felt like losing my father all over again, like watching his life's work be erased piece by piece. But what I didn't realize then was that sometimes, God lets things fall apart, so you can build something that's truly yours. It took me years to understand that betrayal isn't just about what people take from you, it's about what it forces you to find within yourself. Strength. Patience. Dignity. I used to think justice meant seeing them punished. But now, I know real justice is waking up with peace in your heart, and knowing no one else holds the power to destroy it. When my sister-in-law tried to take everything, I thought she had won. But what she didn't know was that you can't steal resilience. You can't buy integrity. And you can't silence someone who's willing to rebuild with their bare hands. If you've ever been betrayed by family, if someone you loved took advantage of your kindness, I want you to remember this. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for believing the best in people. You were simply good. And goodness always leaves a mark that greed can't erase. So today, when I lock up my little shop and turn off the lights, I whisper a small prayer of gratitude, not for the pain I went through, but for the person I became because of it. Because now, I know that I didn't lose my father's legacy. I became it.